It's not just radio, it's Rockland World Radio. RocklandWorldRadio.com.
Welcome to Lighten Up, a show about bringing more love, light, and joy into your life, and archived on the Lighten Up program page. Please join us in the chat room by clicking on the chat room icon located on the left-hand side of our menu bar. Now the host of Lighten Up, Isabel Merians.
Welcome to Lighten Up with Isabel, your good news show. Each program we try to bring you very good news and teach always ways of bringing more love and light and joy into your life. Now, the good news that I have for you today, I have several things. First was I found out recently that Prince, the very famous, talented musician who passed away recently, died without a will. But I also found out that he was really a secret philanthropist. And he left behind, when he did not leave behind a will, but his tax records show that he gave millions and millions of dollars away over the years to various homeless shelters and schools. And he actually founded a charity called Love One Another, which is really, I found, extraordinary. He was actually a Jehovah's Witness, and they believe in never speaking about their own good deeds. So that's probably the reason that no one knew that he was such a philanthropist. So that's my first bit of good news. Secondly, I found out that there is a breakthrough treatment for hepatitis C that they have recently discovered that's 100% successful. Thirdly, I found out that, grateful for his American dream opportunity, an immigrant CEO is sharing millions of dollars with his workers at Chobani Yogurt. So these were all happy things that I learned. But the very best news of all is today is my guest, whose name is Tom Sereika, and who is truly a hero. Welcome, John. So happy to have you on the show.
Nice. Thanks to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Isabel.
My great pleasure. Shall we tell the audience how we met?
Why not?
Okay.
I don't know if it's going to be as interesting as Prince and the CEO of Chobani, but...
I think it'll be even better.
All right.
Actually, I met Tom for the first time, quite by chance. I was in the beauty shop getting a manicure, and I noticed some commotion up at the front of the shop. And I saw this gentleman with a lot of hair bringing in a woman who had short gray hair. And he turned to the receptionist and he said, "I'm turning her over to you," he said. "I'm sick of trying to color her hair." He said, "Every time I do it, I make a mess. I get the dye on my clothes, I get the dye on the floor." He said, "So I'm turning her over to you." And the receptionist said, "Certainly, sir. We'll see who the next available operator will be, and we'll take care of her." And with that, Tom grabbed his own hair and pulled as hard as he could, and it came off in his hand, and we all cracked up.
Never came back again.
Never came back again.
Never came back. Here I am.
We had a great, everybody in the shop loved it. It was a great sight gag. And I thought, this guy's got a great sense of humor. Now, I told this story on another one of my podcasts, and about 6 months later, I saw you in the same beauty shop, and I said, "Oh," and you came over, and what'd you say to me?
I said, "Do you remember?" And you did, and I was glad, and you said you laughed and had a real good memory of it.
Right.
And that was what I was trying to accomplish, basically.
And you
just
said,
make somebody laugh.
And you said to me, "I saw it, your podcast."
Podcast, right? I heard that I was on, and I managed to find it myself. And I thank you for remembering and being part of it.
And I said to Tom, "Tom, how would you like to be a guest?"
And here I am.
And I'm delighted about that. And Tom has had a really extraordinary, I call him a hero, Tom Sereika was a teacher first for 6 years and then a guidance counselor. And I'm going to let him tell us a little bit about that.
First of all, I'd like to make an unsolicited testimonial for all the teachers out there, that anybody who's teaching or working with children watching this, that it's such a rewarding career and field of endeavor that they all deserve raises. They all deserve raises.
Heroes,
they're all heroes to me. Every educator that I've run into. Now, they're good and bad in every field of endeavor, but
of course,
my teachers were terrific. I came from a school in an inner city that had over 1,500, as you said, students.
Right.
So you can imagine 1,500 students pouring through from pre-K.
And you were the one guidance
counselor. I, for a while, was the only guidance counselor. Wow. I referred to myself as, I'll give you a baseball reference here in case there are any baseball fans. I was like Derek Jeter. Any ground ball that I called them ground balls, I came through the door, I had to field. I had to pick up and deal with. There were many situations. 37 years I spent fielding ground balls, but I wouldn't trade one day.
I'm sure you helped so many young people, and you told me that you were always for the underdog. And you told me that in the beginning, I think the school was primarily black, and then there was an influx of Spanish, then an influx of Korean, and an influx of Indian. And trying to integrate those new groups and have them accepted must have been really exhausting.
Well, diversity was our middle name.
Yeah.
We certainly were diverse. At one time, I tried to calculate how many languages or dialects were represented in the school. And I think the count came up to around 34.
Wow.
34 languages or dialects in the building.
Wow.
So we
and
certainly...
Did you have language teachers who would translate?
Not for everybody. There was a time where I had to go hunting for a Cantonese teacher.
Wow.
To communicate with a Cantonese family that came directly from China.
Wow.
And that was just one of the situations we had. But you can imagine when I was teaching, I taught for 6 years, the 8th grade, and you can imagine the feeling that a teacher has when the vice principal brings a student to your door from Spain and cannot speak a word of English.
Wow.
And says, "Here, Mr. Sereika, this is Pilar."
Deal with
Which
it.
actually happened to me, by the way.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
Yeah, so you took him to the Spanish class.
And you go through that whole situation.
Shall we tell them about your Spanish experience within the classroom?
Oh, you're gonna. Oh, yeah. I was hoping you were gonna forget that one.
No, I thought it was pretty funny.
But yeah, I even though I was in a guidance office, I never liked to leave the children. I wanted to be on this side of the desk with the kids. I taught, and I was on that side, teaching all the time. But I wanted to get on this side where the families were and having trouble. So in my endeavor to try to stay in the classroom and be in touch with the kids, I happened to go up one day to the Spanish ESL classroom. And I wanted basically to get involved with the kids in the Spanish classroom as much as I could. And my Spanish was,
limited.
Yeah, limited at best. So I got into the story, and the class was totally bilingual, including the teacher. And I went on with my broken Spanish. And at one point in the story, I was groping for a word. And the word I was groping for in English was embarrassed. Don't ask me, I can't remember how exactly I got on that track. But I said, well, let's see, real quick, embarrassed, agua. A lot of words in Spanish can translate to English. I'll use this word, embarazo. So I told the children, yo embarazo. Well, 28 kids put their heads down on a desk and started laughing because they didn't want to laugh in my face.
Okay.
And I turned immediately to the teacher who had remained in his seat, and he was laughing. And I asked him, and I said, what did I do? He said, Mr. Sereika, you just told the children that you were pregnant.
I think that's wonderful.
Pregnant. Yeah.
That was the word
Which
you
was,
chose.
yeah.
That was the word you chose.
Yeah.
It's really very interesting. You told me also a story about a young Indian boy that a very slight little boy who was trying to integrate into the class and who was looking for some way to bring him in and make him feel more comfortable. Would you tell that story?
Sure. Like you said before, I was always for the underdog. And this fella, little Indian boy, was about 12, 13 years old, but very undersized for his age. However, I had conversations with him, and he spoke to me about cricket. Now, I was an athlete when I was younger myself, so I played baseball, hockey, basketball, football, but knew nothing about cricket. It was foreign to all of us, basically. But with the influx of the Indian children, they brought cricket with them.
I'm sure that's a big sport in
So
India.
I told him, I said, listen, why don't you tomorrow bring in your cricket bat and teach us about cricket? Because in education, it can go both ways. Education can come from the teacher to the student, and also you should be able to learn from the students.
Yeah, that's a great attitude.
So the very next day, I went back to the very same classroom, and there he was sitting there, proud as could be, with his bat. But we needed a ball. So I grabbed a couple pieces of paper, wadded them up, put some tape around them. I had all the kids push the desks and chairs to the side of the room, and we had a cricket match.
And he must have felt...
And he was the teacher, and he was so proud of it.
Of course. And a way of integrating him into the group.
Absolutely.
So that he didn't feel like he was completely lost.
That was the big thing in school. I had a boss who was principal, and one of his biggest tricks, if you want to call it that, because when you teach, you have to have a bag of tricks.
Oh, absolutely.
And he used to pull that out many, many times in different forms. 8th graders, we had about 120 8th graders. And on a Friday afternoon, he would bring them down to the auditorium, he'd put them on the stage, and he'd put on that, dance that they do at weddings, the electric slide where everybody goes out and participates. He would put that on, and he'd have 120 8th grade students dancing the electric slide. But just another way.
That's wonderful.
Of bringing the kids together.
And what about conflict resolution? I mean, because 8th graders can be pretty tough.
Well, it's... I say this all the time, and I don't mean it in a harmful way, but at that age, they don't know if they're animals, vegetables, minerals, and it's difficult for them. Everything is cooking, inside. Things are changing, and their bodies are changing. Right. So the conflict resolutions,
just getting kids to sit down.
We had problems, of course, like any other school. We had our share of fights. And one of the little tricks that he would use was to all of a sudden See, a lot of places, you take the two combatants and you separate them.
Right.
Keep them as far away from each other.
Yeah.
He didn't believe in that. He believed in what we used to call the Delphi Theory. Now, the Delphi Theory was a theory back in ancient Greece where the center of democracy supposedly was created. And it was created in a way where all the brilliant minds were brought to the city of Delphi to come up with ideas of how to run a government, a state. Well, that's what he did, but on a much smaller scale. He would bring the combatants together, face to face, to discuss what exactly was going wrong, what was the differences between them, and we would have time where it took 10 minutes. There was an occasion once where he went over and we were at like loggerheads, nobody wanted to give an inch, and he put the radio on and he started dancing. The
principal started dancing. So did the kids crack up?
Absolutely. What would you do if you saw your principal dancing?
I'd be so stunned I wouldn't be able to believe it.
So the kids in about 5 more minutes forgot what they were angry about. We calmed the situation down.
Did they start dancing with him?
He offered it, but they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it.
That's very funny. Well, I jotted down a few things, Tom, that we had discussed that sort of stuck in my mind. And one was Code 6.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to share that, because I know that sometimes dealing with irate parents is pretty...
Yeah, we had my office was right at the main entrance of the building, and the building was huge. It was built in 1927. It was a gorgeous building, but I used to occupy the dental office because back in those days,
The kids got dental?
kids were offered dental care.
Wow.
So my office became, was the dental office. Not that I didn't have any drills or anything left over, but it was right there by the entranceway. And if an irate parent came in, the secretaries used to use the code word 6, Code 6. And they would tell the principal, whose office was directly on the other side of the vestibule. He'd come out, I'd come out. We'd greet the irate parent, offer them coffee, offer them a place to sit down and relax. Come on in, let's talk.
Calm them down a bit.
Calm them down a bit, because an irate parent is something hard to deal with.
I'm sure. It's all emotion.
It's pure emotion, and you have to
Step it down.
step it down a bit. So Code 6 was, but I want to just mention this because I think I'd be remiss if I didn't. I used to have a sign in my office. I have a great belief in signs and sayings because I believe that they came from somewhere, and they were meant to
They
be.
apply.
This is 5 words, Isabel.
Okay.
And the sign says, if nothing changes, nothing changes.
That's very true.
Think about it.
Yeah. You have to change an attitude.
Yeah, if an adult is trying to lose weight, you can't keep up with your normal day-to-day habits.
Right.
Something's got to
has to
change.
Absolutely.
And this is what we used to say to the kids, too. And wonderfully, I was in the school for 37 years, and I watched children go through our hands, and there were changes that were magnificent to see.
Which is wonderful, and that's why you're a hero.
They were wonderful to see. Parents at home raise their kids.
Sure.
And I, as a parent of 2 daughters, I used to just marvel at their ability to conquer our language. You know, my wife and I, we didn't sit down and teach them the words, but yet they spoke.
Right.
By the time they got to be age 5, 6, 3, they said their first words.
That's
It's a
exciting.
miracle.
Yeah.
So I got to see that in school for 37 years.
Wow, I think that's fabulous. Now, actually, you told me a story about how you would know. You would greet the children at the door, and you'd always know who was like priming for a fight when they walked in the door. And I thought that was pretty amazing.
Yeah,
Do you want to share that?
This was like a sixth sense that you developed working in the inner city. You had to watch for cues and clues. One of the doors of the building that the bigger children entered, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, I was put there in the morning and at dismissal time to make sure the entrance was go smooth and the exits would go smooth.
Right.
Well, I was not alone. There were about 4 or 5 other fellows with us there. And we all had that. We were all attuned. If we saw a young lady, let's say, come in and had Vaseline all over her face and had her hair done very tightly in cornrows or something like that, we knew that meant one thing, that there was a fight brewing.
Well, I guess because if someone hits you,
Like a boxer.
a boxer glances off
So
the grease.
we would then pick that student out, stand over here. You're
Really?
not going upstairs.
Wow.
We'll find out what's going on. And of course, that was just one instance. Children come in. Just the other day, my granddaughter, pink eye.
Oops.
You would look at their eyes. Pink eye, come over, stand here. You're not going upstairs. You go right to the nurse.
Right.
Another child might come in, and you might know the family and the situation, and ask them if they had any breakfast. And they would honestly answer, yes or no. And if they said no, the cafeteria was not too far from that door. We'd march them into the cafeteria, get them some cereal, get them a roll, make sure they had something to eat before they went upstairs.
Great.
So, yeah, you were attuned.
To all of the necessities and the changes
Yeah.
in the kids. I think it's pretty remarkable, really, that, you were able to do that. Now, you also told me some stories about children that you had seen within the school system, and you were so delighted at how they had turned themselves around and turned out to be have very good positions and, be really okay in later life.
As adults.
Yeah. Do you want to share a couple of those?
Yeah, when you become a productive adult, you get a job.
Right.
And your job could be a car salesman. And if you sell a car, at the end of the month, you're getting a check. You get commission. So it's instant feedback.
Right.
In school, you don't have that. In school, you could teach for years. And the kids pass through elementary school, go to high school, and 90% of them you never see again. So you don't know if you've done your job completely. I've had some happy occasions in that regard. Unfortunately, I lost my wife to a long battle with cancer, breast cancer, about 3.5, 4 years ago.
I'm sorry.
And during that battle, we were at the hospital many times. And there was one particular night where I went out and it snowed, and it was still snowing, and I went out to check the car, and she was inside, and we had to stay for overnight. And as I was walking out to the car, of course it was snowing, and there was a young lady walking towards me. And she looked at me, and I looked at her, and again, she was bundled up, but yet took the time to say, she dropped her hood and said, "Mr. Sereika?" And I acknowledged. And she said her name, and I'm sorry I can't remember it. And she said, "I had you over at number 11 school as a guidance counselor."
Wow.
I said, "Oh, my goodness." So we hugged. And she told me she was a wound specialist now at the hospital. And we exchanged pleasantries, and she was on her way to work and had to punch in. So that was just like two ships passing in the night, but we happened to meet instead of pass.
It's so nice when that does happen.
And so this was, the young lady had to be in her early 30s. And it was nice.
It must be so very gratifying. It's like, it's like when your own children turn out well. You take such pride in that. And here you've been, guidance counselor to so many, hundreds and hundreds of students. You know what
she said to me? She said, "I remember, Mr. Sereika, the Billy Joel song you brought into school and played for us."
Well, these are things kids
Imagine?
remember. No, I do imagine, because these are the happy things that kids remember.
And we always tried at school, at least I did and a lot of my colleagues. When we were in school and everybody else out there was in school, you went on field trips.
Sure, and those are memorable.
But where did you go? You went to the museum. You went to the UN building. You went to...
Wherever.
We tried to come up with experiences that they might not ever have again.
Oh, really?
We used to run a picnic.
Nice.
A picnic. We took them to the park.
Everybody loves a picnic.
We barbecued. We had hot dogs and hamburgers. And sad to say, I said to a few of the fellas that, were out there with me out at the park, I said, they might never get here again.
Which is amazing and unfortunate. They should.
Yeah.
It's a place to get to.
We took them to Mets games.
Fun.
Mets games.
That's
a
totally
busload to the Mets game.
That's totally fun.
We had them picnicking. We had them ice skating. I took them ice skating one time.
Oh, my God. I would have been a nervous wreck if anybody got hurt.
No, everybody hung on to the side rails. Nobody skated.
Oh, that's funny.
But we believed in trying to broaden their experiences.
Which is wonderful.
And if you could do it even through a field trip and make it a little different.
Sure, absolutely.
And this young lady happened to remember the Billy Joel song that I played in, because I like Billy Joel, and a lot of his songs have a lot of meat to them if you analyze them.
Absolutely.
But
well, I think that's lovely. Now, tell me this. Did you, when you saw a kid that you knew was coming in for a fight, what would you do with that student? I mean, because they hadn't actually done anything, so you can't isolate them. So what would you do with them?
Well, you knew that the weekend, this is the way it went. The weekends, and especially Monday morning, was always a little tenuous.
Yeah,
Because something that went down over the weekend we didn't know anything about,
sure.
but something would have happened in the neighborhood. And then they knew the common ground where they could find one another for sure was at school on Monday morning.
Sure.
Unfortunately, some of that, came to be. Sometimes we headed them off, and sometimes we didn't. But for the most part, either or, they wound up in my office, the principal's office, and our conflict resolution shopping bag was opened.
Yeah.
There were times I can remember where I would ask one of the combatants if it was around Christmas time. I remember this one. I went into the closet and pulled out a box of decorations, and we had a Christmas tree outside. And I say, "Here, decorate the tree."
Good. So
Just
you
to
put
get their
minds
mind,
focused on something totally different.
take them off guard.
Right.
Yeah,
Smart.
yeah.
Very smart.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. Well, one of the things that I did today was that I wrote down a few things which are suggestions for people, because so many people are so unresolved today. They're so surrounded by negativity. And so what I did is I wrote down a couple of things that you can do in 5 minutes or less to be happier. And the first thing I wrote down was, my suggestion is to make a list of things that you're thankful for. Because I truly believe if one lives one's life in gratitude, it makes you a happier person. And that can be the simplest thing. I mean, waking up in the morning is a blessing. Looking outside and seeing a beautiful tree or a bird is a blessing. So many things that people take for granted. Turning on your tap and getting clean water is a blessing. I mean, all of these things that we're so blessed with, no one takes the time to
Smell the flowers.
smell the flowers and take the time and be appreciative. And I think everybody has challenges in this life and everyone has problems. But I sincerely believe that if you live a life in gratitude, that you're much happier. The second thing I wrote down is that if you're in a cranky mood, put on your favorite song. That'll make you feel better immediately. Music has a way of being very healing. And, if you feel like it, dance around a little bit. That makes it even better. The third thing I wrote down is go look in a mirror and smile at yourself. And say to yourself, I'm a pretty okay person. I'm smiling at myself.
Yeah, someone once said that it takes, 20 muscles to frown and only 6 to smile.
Yeah, I know smiling
So it's a lot less
it's
effort.
a lot less. Another thing I wrote down is that if you have 5 minutes, go outside and go for a walk. And I call it an adventure walk. And just really look at what's around you. What is surrounding you? Are there trees? Are there shrubs? Are there butterflies? Are there birds? But think of it as a mini adventure and really take in all of the beauty that surrounds us. And the fifth thing I wrote down, if you have a little more than 5 minutes, if you really have some time, what you might want to consider is renting a funny movie. Because you might remember the story about Dr. Norman Cousins, who was so desperately ill. And when his own physician said to him, go home and get your affairs in order, we can't do anything more for you, he didn't do that. He instead went out, took a hotel room, and rented a whole bunch of funny movies. And for months, he just stayed in the hotel room, had room service, and watched funny movies. And he wrote a book about it. And supposedly at the end of that period of time, his illness was gone. So to me, humor is a very healing thing, which was one of the reasons I originally wanted to get you on this program, because I think you're very funny.
I'm glad you think so. That's nice to hear.
But the more I got to know you, I thought, wait a minute, I was looking for a humorist, and I found a hero. So I decided to switch my focus to something different.
A humorous hero.
A humorist hero.
Well,
and I think that this is
I
really
appreciate
true.
that. I appreciate that. I very much do. The hero, I'm not so sure about. You know, when I was going through school and spent all those times and hours with the kids and parents, and you really think that sometimes, you know, it's, what is it? Is it all worth it? And I used to tell my parents sometimes, you know, they used to complain that they talk to their child and it goes in one ear and out the other. But I was around so many children and other people's children besides my own,
Right.
that I knew for a fact that, yes, that might be the impression you get, that it goes in one ear and out the other.
Right.
But some of it stays.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you can start out with a positive note, whatever the situation. The kid had a fight, but he got a good grade in Spanish. Or the kid had a fight, but he's did something to help someone else.
Absolutely.
And if you can bring out the positive first, it's much easier to then have the kid listen to what you're saying.
Absolutely.
In other words, if you don't go on the attack.
Right. Well, I used to do something along those lines. I used to have a little career day that I would conjure up. Being the guidance counselor, one of my jobs and job descriptions was to introduce occupations. Because what kids need,
Some focus.
I don't care how old they are,
Direction.
I don't care where they live, they need direction and they need information.
Absolutely.
And I used to try to run around, and I have corralled, I'm going to say a good 24 alumni of my school,
Right.
and brought them back and let them speak
Oh,
to
that's,
the eighth
that's always
graders.
a great idea, sure.
And here's an eighth grader seeing someone who graduated and sat in the exact same seat that they were sitting in at the moment,
Right.
who now was the branch manager at the bank up the block at Journal Square, or was a dental hygienist
Right. And
that
then-
I happened to bump into, or anywhere. The girl I spoke to you earlier about, the wound specialist. Try to get them back in and show positive experiences.
I think that's wonderful. I think you have a very creative inclination.
Yeah, you have to.
I
You
mean,
have
it
to.
sounds like to me that you were, every day was a creative experience
You have to
in
have
dealing with all of these situations.
a bag of tricks. Substitute teaching, for example, substitutes, hardest job in the world. Hardest job in the world.
Well, because what they usually do is they just try to keep the classroom quiet.
Well,
They
you see,
keep order.
and what I said
They
to
don't
you,
really teach them.
what I said to you earlier, about direction and information. You know yourself, even our cameraman. You had a substitute come in, teach your class. Well, school was out for that day.
Sure.
Second day, if your teacher happened to be ill, you still acted up and tried to get back to by the third day, you were tired of acting up. You were tired of the tomfoolery that was going on. You wanted your teacher back because you wanted the structure
And
that you were used to.
Yeah,
You wanted the direction, and you wanted to learn.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, Tom, I want to thank you so much. You've been a wonderful guest.
Thank
And
you.
I think
Thank
it's
you,
been
Isabel.
a fun show.
It went much too quick.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you again.
You're welcome. More than welcome.
It was fun having you. A fun guest.
I hope I can get back, sit at the table here with you on another occasion.
Oh, maybe we can arrange that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And next time we will try to have a wonderful guest as well. Might not be quite as funny or as fun as Tom, but we'll see what we can do.
Thank you again, Isabel.
Thank you.
Until next time, remember to live a more joyous life. Lighten up.
It's not just radio, it's Rockland World Radio. RocklandWorldRadio.com